Hello and welcome to this new video. In this video, we're going to cover some important practice exam question answers for MS-102, which is Microsoft 365 Administrator exam, including the case study questions. So before going to the question answers, we request you to kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not already a subscriber. So let's jump on to the question. So question number 1. You are a support engineer for an organization that uses Azure AD. Your organization has recently purchased a new domain and rebranded it. The domain has been successfully added to Azure AD as an accepted domain. Your manager has asked you to ensure that the new domain is the primary email alias address for any new email box that are provisioned within the tenant. Which of the following Microsoft Exchange PowerShell CMD alerts should you run to complete this task? And we have the following 4 options. So the right answer here is option C. So set dash email address policy is the correct answer. You need to use the set email address policy CMD let. This CMD let modifies the email address policy in Exchange Online. Email address policies are only available with Microsoft 365 groups. So question number 2. Your company has Microsoft 365 subscription. You need to identify all the users in the subscription who are licensed for Microsoft Office 365 through a group membership. The solution must include the name of the group used to assign the license. What should you use? And we have the following 4 options. Option A, active users in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Option B, reports in Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. Option C, the licenses blade in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. And option D, reports in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So the right answer here is option C, the licenses played in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. So question number 3, you have a Microsoft 365 subscription that contains the users shown in the following table. So you can pause the video to have a look at the table. You need to configure a dynamic user group that will include the guest users in any department that contains the word support. How should you complete the membership rule? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So you have answer area. So let's see the solution. So the right answers are question number 4. You are a system administrator for an organization that has a hybrid identity environment with user objects residing in Active Directory and being synchronized to Azure AD with Microsoft 365 E3 licenses. You have recently enabled self-service password reset for a small group of users for a proof of concept. The implementation will use the mobile app notification authentication method only. Users are reporting that when they try to reset the password from the SSPR portal, they get an error and need to contact their administrator. Your manager believes there is a setting missing from the implementation and asks you to investigate. Which of the following is the cause of the error? And we have the following 4 options. Option A, users need more than a single authentication method set up before SSPR will work. Option B, the users do not have a license that supports SSPR. Option C, password write back needs to be configured to allow on-premises AD accounts to utilize SSPR. And option D, the authentication method is not supported. So the right answer here is option C. Password write back needs to be configured to allow on-premises AD accounts to utilize SSPR. If your environment has an on-premises accounts that synchronize with Azure AD, then without password write back being enabled, SSPR will not work. If it is a cloud native account only in Azure AD, then this configuration is not required for SSPR to work. Therefore, this is a correct answer. Question number 5. Your company uses a legacy on-premises LDAP directory that contains 100 users. The company purchases a Microsoft 365 subscription. You need to import the 100 users into Microsoft 365 by using the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Which type of file should you use and which properties are required? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So file type to use, we have the following 4 options, and required properties for each user, we have the following 4 options. So the right answer here is, so file type to use is CSV, required properties for each user, username and display name. So question number 6, an organization is implementing a cloud native environment and you want to help them prepare for migration to the cloud. The organization's existing Microsoft Entra tenant synchronizes with an on-premises Active Directory, and it has recently deployed an Azure AD domain service instance. You implement a password policy to match the existing on-premises password policy. During testing, you find that users are having to wait 10 minutes after a failed logon attempt before they can try again. Although this matches the on-premises policy, your manager has asked you to change the login wait time to 2 minutes. Which setting should you change? We have the following 4 options. Option A, account locked out duration. Option B, maximum password age. Option C, reset account lockout counter after. Option D, number of failed login attempts allowed. So the right answer here is option C, reset account lockout counter after. The reset account lockout counter after policy setting determines the number of minutes that must elapse from the time of user fails to log on before the failed login attempt counter is reset to 0. Changing these settings to 2 minutes will achieve the requirement in the scenario. Therefore, this is the correct answer. So question number 7. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription that contains the users shown in the following table. You need to configure group-based licensing to meet the following requirements. To all users, deploy an Office 365 E3 license without the Power Automate license options. To all users, deploy an Enterprise Mobility plus Security E5 license. To all the users in the research department only, deploy a Power BI Pro license. To the users in the marketing department only, deploy a Vision Plan 2 license. What is the minimum number of deployment groups required? And we have the following 5 options. So the right answer here is option C, 3. Question number 8. Alexis is reviewing and managing the security alerts within Microsoft Defender at her organization. She would like to filter out incoming alerts as true or false to gain better data. But she is not sure which alert management tool will help her. Which security alert management option should Alexis choose? And we have the following 4 options. Option A, alert status, alert suppression rules, alert classification, alert assignment. So the right answer here is option C, alert classification. Alert classification allows the administrator to define rules that would otherwise trigger true or false matches for alerts. It is also the only tool if the choices that includes the determination field for assigning classification. So question number 8, you have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription that contains the users shown in the following table. So you add the following assignment for the user administrator role. So you can pause the video to have a look at the table and the assignment. So, so for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So we have the following three statements. So let's see which one is true and which one is false. So the first statement is true, the second one is false, and the third statement is true. So question number 10. You are a third line support engineer for an organization that has recently migrated its services to a hybrid environment where you have resources both on premises and in Microsoft 365 Cloud. A new member has joined the second line support team and needs access to be able to manage and create Microsoft 365 groups. Your team leader has asked you to implement the relevant permissions in Microsoft 365 to allow the new team member to create and manage Microsoft 365 groups. However, you must adhere to least privileged access. To which Microsoft 365 administrator role should you assign the new team member? We have the following four options: Exchange Administrator, Global Administrator, Teams Administrator, and Service Support Administrator. So the right answer here is option A, Exchange Administrator. The principle of least privilege access for the task of managing and creating Microsoft 365 groups, the most appropriate role is Exchange Administrator. The role provides access to the Exchange Admin Center in Microsoft 365. Since Microsoft 365 groups have a mailbox that managed in the Exchange Admin Center, this role would allow the user to manage and create Microsoft 365 groups. So question number 11, you have a Microsoft 365 subscription. You have an Azure AD tenant that contains the users shown in the following table. You configure tenant properties as shown in the following exhibit. So you can pause the video to have a look at the table and the exhibit. Which users will be contacted by Microsoft if the tenant experiences a data breach? And we have the following five options. So the right answer here is option B, user 2 only. So question number 12, as the compliance officer for your organization, you are looking for a way to ensure any staff that leaves your organization will have their mailbox data available for a minimum of 365 days to ensure no important data is lost from that user's mailbox once they have had their account deleted. How should you achieve these with minimal administrative effort and still conform to compliance requirements? We have the following four options. Option A, export mailbox to PST and store PST on a file share. Option B, apply a Microsoft 365 retention policy to the mailbox prior to user deletion and utilize the inactive mailbox report. Option C, ensure the user is assigned an archive mailbox and instruct them to move all data into this area. Option D, set up synchronization of a user mailbox to public folders. So the right answer here is option B, apply Microsoft 365 retention policy to the mailbox prior to user deletion and utilize the inactive mailbox report. Making a mailbox inactive requires a hold on the mailbox, which can be achieved with Microsoft 365 retention policies. Once the user account has been deleted, this retention will ensure all mailbox data is kept. These mailboxes will then be referred to as inactive mailboxes and can be viewed via the compliance portal. Question number 13. Your network contains an Active Directory forest named contoso.local. You purchase a Microsoft 365 subscription. You plan to move to Microsoft 365 and to implement a hybrid deployment solution for the next 12 months. You need to prepare for the planned move to Microsoft 365. What is the best action to perform before you implement directory synchronization? More than one answer choice may achieve the goal. Select the best answer. And you have four options. Option A, purchase a third-party X509 certificate. Option B, create an external forest trust. Option C, rename the Active Directory forest. And option D, purchase a custom domain name. So the right answer here is option D, purchase a custom domain name. So question number 14. A service technician manages a hybrid identity environment with an Azure AD tenant and an Azure Active Directory domain services domain. The technician uses Entra ID Connect, formerly Azure AD Connect, to sync both user and computer objects from Active Directory to Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure ID, but only for specific organizational units within the company. A new user joins the company and their Active Directory user object is created. However, after several hours and successful scheduled synchronizations, it is still not showing in Microsoft Entra ID. What should be the possible cause of this issue? And we have four options. Option A, the user has not been assigned a license for Microsoft 365. Option B, the user object is not in an OU that synchronizes with Entra ID. Option C, the Entra ID sync service account is locked. Option D, the Entra ID sync service has stopped. So the right answer here is option B, the user object is not in OU that synchronizes with Entra ID. So when configuring Entra ID sync for the first time, you have the option to either synchronize the entire domain with Entra ID or select specific OUs. The scenario states that specific OUs are synchronized with Entra ID. Therefore, if the user has not moved into an OU that syncs with Entra ID, it will not appear in the cloud. Therefore, this is the correct answer. So question number 15. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription. You configure a new Azure AD Enterprise application named App1. App1 requires that a user be assigned the reports reader role. Which type of group should you use to assign the reports reader role and to access App1? And we have four options. Option A, a Microsoft 365 group that has assigned membership. Option B, a Microsoft 365 group that has dynamic user membership. Option C, a security group that has assigned membership. Option D, a security group that has dynamic user membership. So the right answer here is option C, a security group that has assigned membership. So question number 16. You are a cloud IT technician who works for an organization that utilizes multi-factor authentication for its users when they access specific cloud applications. Your manager has reported that you amend the existing conditional access policy so that it will accept Users authentication from the corporate offices from getting an MFA prompt. Which setting should you configure to amend the conditional access policy? And we have four options. Option A, access control. Option B, session control. Option C, device platform condition. And option D, location condition. So the right answer here is option D, location condition. You should configure location condition in this case. You can add named locations in the condition location section of the conditional access policy and accept those locations so they do not have to authenticate via MFA when making a connection to the apps that are covered in the conditional access policy. So question number 17. You have a new Microsoft 365 E5 tenant. You need to enable an alert policy that will be triggered when an elevation of Microsoft Exchange Online administrative privileges is detected. What should you do first? And we have four options. Option A, enable auditing. Option B, enable Microsoft 365 usage analytics. Option C, create an insider risk management policy. Option D, create a communication compliance policy. So the right answer here is option A, enable auditing. Question number 18. John is a global administrator for Blue Widget Co. David is a partner of Blue Widget Co., not a member of Blue Widget Co. organizations. John needs to provide David with access to a corporate application. What two steps does John need to follow in order to grant David access to the application? Choose two answers. And we have the following four options. Option A, John needs to create a user account for David with Blue Widget Co's Azure AD and provide David with an organizational email address. Option B, John needs to add David as a guest user to the Blue Widget Co. Azure AD using David's existing email address. Option C, John needs to enable MFA for David's new Azure AD account. Option D, John needs to assign the corporate application to David's account. So the right answer here is option B and option C. So since David is not a member of Blue Widget Co's organization, he needs to be added to the Blue Widget Co. Azure AD as a guest user. Once he has been added as a guest user, the corporate application that he needs access to can be assigned to him by John. Question number 19. Your network contains an on-premises Active Directory domain named contoso.com. The domain contains 1000 Windows 10 devices. You perform a proof of concept POC deployment of Microsoft Defender for endpoint for 10 test devices. During the onboarding process, you configure Microsoft Defender for endpoint related data to be stored in the United States. You plan to onboard all the devices to Microsoft Defender for endpoint. You need to store the Microsoft Defender for endpoint data in Europe. What should you do first? And we have the following four options. Delete the workspace, create a workspace, onboard a new device, offboard the test devices. So the right answer here is option B, create a workspace. So question number 20. You are an IT admin at your organization and would like to push automatic sensitivity labeling to files in the organization's database for easier management of classified information. You plan to use Defender for cloud apps in order to automatically migrate many common file types. You begin the process of automatic migration but discover that one file type cannot be automatically migrated. You suspect that it requires a unified label type for Defender for cloud apps in order to automatically apply sensitivity labels. Which file type requires unified label types? And we have the following four options. So the right answer here is option C, .pdf. So in order to push sensitivity labels to PDF files, you need to ensure that label's policies are unified. And .docs, .xlsx, and .ppt files do not require unified label types in order to receive sensitivity labels. So question number 21. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription that contains a user named user1. User1 exceeds the default daily limit of allowed email messages and is on the restricted entities list. You need to remove user1 from the restricted entities list. What should you use? And we have following five options. Option A, the Exchange Admin Center. Option B, the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. Option C, the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Option D, the Microsoft 365 Defender Portal. And option D, the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. So the right answer here is option D, the Microsoft 365 Defender Portal. So question number 22. As a security administrator for your organization, you have enabled safe attachment scanning for your users' mailboxes. You're concerned that zero-day attacks may compromise files and data being stored in other areas of the Office 365 productivity suite. What could you configure to give similar levels of protection across these areas? And we have the following four options. Option A, configure a Microsoft Defender for 365 policy to enable real-time detection. Option B, configure a Microsoft Defender for identity policy to enable the detection of suspicious user activity. Option C, configure a Microsoft Defender for 365 policy to enable safe attachments for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams. Option D, configure a Microsoft Defender for identity policy to enable detection of threat trackers. So the right answer here is option C. Configure a Microsoft Defender for 365 policy to enable safe attachments for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams. Microsoft has included safe attachments and safe attachments for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams as part of the Defender for Office 365 P1 and P2 SKUs. Therefore, in order to enable scanning of both mailbox and wider Office 365 productivity file scanning, you should enable this feature with Defender for Office 365 policies in the Microsoft Defender admin portal. So question number 23. Your company has a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. Users in the research department work with sensitive data. You need to prevent the research department users from accessing potential unsafe websites by using hyperlinks embedded in email message and documents. Users in other department must not be restricted. What should you do? And we have the following four options. Option A, create a data loss prevention DLP policy that has a content shared condition. Option B, modify the safe links policy global settings. Option C, create a data loss prevention DLP policy that has a content contains condition. Option D, create a new safe links policy. So the right answer here is option D, create a new safe links policy. So question number 24. You are a support technician for an organization that has recently migrated from Exchange on premises to Exchange online. As a part of the cleanup phase, your manager informs you that a number of users have PST files they need access to as part of their new Exchange online mailbox. Your manager has asked you to import these information from Microsoft 365 via the network upload method. Which of the following tools should you use to upload the files? And we have the following four options: SharePoint Migration Tool, Azure Storage Explorer, AZ Copy, Azure File Sync. So the right answer here is option C, AZ Copy. The AZ Copy tool is the only supported tool for a PST network upload to Microsoft 365. You cannot use any other data migration tool to directly upload PST files directly to the Azure storage area. So question number 25. You have an Azure AD tenant that contains the users shown in the following table. Your company uses Microsoft Defender for endpoint. Microsoft Defender for endpoint contains the roles shown in the following table. Microsoft Defender for endpoint contains the device group shown in the following table. So for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So we have the following statements. User 1 can run an antivirus scan on device 2. User 2 can collect an investigation package from device 2. User 3 can isolate device 1. So the right options are, so the first statement is false, the second one is false, and the third statement is true. So question number 26. So Mika is responsible for making sure that outgoing data at his organization follows accurate retention and deletion rules set by company policy. He needs to make sure he understands retention principles clearly before publishing the set of retention label policies he has written. Which of the following should he know about the principles of retention in Microsoft 365 compliance? And we have the following four options. Option A, deletion wins over retention. Option B, the shortest retention period wins. Option C, implicit wins over explicit for deletions. Option D, the shortest deletion period wins. So the right answer here is option D, the shortest deletion period wins. So question number 27. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 tenant. You need to ensure that administrators are notified when a user receives an email message that contains malware. The solution must use the principles of least privilege. Which type of policy should you create, and which Microsoft Purview solution role is required to create the policy? To answer, select the appropriate option in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the policy type, we have 3 options, and the rule, we have 4 options. So the right answers are, so for the policy type, we have alert, and for the role, we have organization management. So question number 28. As a security officer at your organization, you seek information about security trends and track the protection status of your organization's identities, data, devices, apps, and infrastructure. What steps would you need to take to find this information? And we have the following 4 options. Option A, download the security reports.ps1 PowerShell script from Microsoft and run on a local machine to generate HTML reports of your environment. Option B, from the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, open the General Security Report page. Option C, from the Microsoft 365 admin portal, export all reports. Option D, from the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, select Action Center. So the right answer here is option B, from the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, open the General Security Report page. So this report can be accessed from Microsoft 365 Defender portal. The Reports tab contains a number of reports covering general, endpoints, and email collaboration postures. In this case, the information you're looking for is contained in General Security Report. So question number 29. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. You need to compare the current safe links configuration to the Microsoft recommended configuration. So what should you use? And we have the following four options: Microsoft Purview, Azure AD Identity Protection, Microsoft Secure Score, the Configuration Analyzer. So the right answer here is option C, Microsoft Secure Score. Question number 30. Calvin is managing and responding to security alerts raised in Defender for Cloud's app. He is concerned about multiple alerts relating to an unsecured user or device, and he isn't sure how to respond to the alerts that actually require user contact. For which alert should Calvin reach out to the account owner and ensure they change their password? And we have the following four options. Option A, activity policy violation, new discovered service, compromised account, suspicious activity. So the right answer here is option C, compromised account. So question number 31. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription that uses Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. When users attempt to access the portal of a partner company, they receive the message shown in the following exhibit. You need to enable user access to the partner company's portal. Which Microsoft Defender for Endpoint setting you should modify? And we have the following five options: alert notifications, alert suppression, custom detections, advanced hunting indicators. So the right answer here is option E, indicators. So question number 31. You are a solution architect for an organization that is planning a Microsoft 365 migration. You want to authenticate all users' identity to my Azure Active Directory. This process includes replicating the hashes of user passwords between Active Directory on-premises and Microsoft 365 hosted Azure AD. Which of the following identity types should you use? And we have the following four options: cloud only, synchronized identity, on-premises identity, federated identity. So the right answer here is option B, synchronized identity. So with synchronized identities, the hashes of user password are replicated from on-premises Active Directory to Azure AD. If the passwords are changed or reset on-premises, the new password hashes are synchronized to Azure AD. So users can always use the same password for both cloud and on-premises resources. Therefore, this is the correct answer. So question number 33. You have a Microsoft 365 E3 subscription. You plan to launch attack simulation training for all users. Which social engineering technique and training experience will be available? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So social engineering technique, we have three options, and training experience, we have three options. So let's see, the right answer here is So for social engineering technique, credential harvest, and for training experience, mass market phishing. So question number 34. So you are an IT support engineer whose company environment contains an Active Directory forest named imitgeek.local and an existing Microsoft 365 tenant. Your company is planning to implement a directory sync with password hash synchronization configured. Your manager has given you the task of implementing the Azure AD sync tool. You first add the domain imitgeek.com to the Microsoft 365 domain and successfully verify it. What task do you need to complete first to prepare the environment for the planned synchronization? And we have the following four options. Option A, add imitgeek.com as a UPN suffix from the Active Directory domains and Trust console. Option B, add a new MX record from the public DNS zone portal for imitgeek.com. Option C, verify the imitgeek.local domain from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Option D, edit the UPN suffix for all users from the Active Directory and users and computers console. So the right answer here is option A, add imitgeek.com as a UPN suffix from the Active Directory domain and Trust consoles. So the correct answer is add imitgeek.com as a UPN suffix from the Active Directory domains and Trusts console. In this scenario, the only domain that can be synchronized with Azure AD from on-premises Active Directory is the imitgeek.local. To allow the imitgeek.com domain to synchronize, it needs to be added as a UPN suffix first. Therefore, this is the correct answer. So question number 35. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription that uses Microsoft Defender for Office 365. You need to ensure that users are prevented from opening or downloading malicious files from Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint Online. What should you do? And we have the following four options. Option A, create a new anti-malware policy. Option B, configure the safe links global settings. Option C, create a new anti-phishing policy. Option D, configure the safe attachments global settings. So the right answer here is option D, configure the safe attachments global settings. So question number 36. You work as a support technician for a company that uses hybrid identity, including Active Directory and Azure AD. The company has a call center in which mobile phones are now permitted and inbound calls are not possible. The company wants to implement multi-factor authentication and your manager has asked you to investigate the available authentication options. Which of the following authentication methods would be possible in this scenario? And we have the following four options. Security questions, FIDO2 hardware key, Microsoft Authenticator app, phone call. So the right answer here is option B, FIDO2 hardware key. So FIDO2 fast identity online secret keys are a standard based passwordless authentication method that can come in any form factor. In this scenario, there are no mobile devices or incoming calls allowed. Therefore, having a FIDO2 security token meets the requirements and can be used to complete the MFA authentication as it is a supported method. Therefore, it is the correct answer. So question number 37. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription that uses a Microsoft Defender for Office 365. The subscription has the default inbound anti-spam policy and a custom safe attachments policy. You need to identify the following information. the number of email messages quarantined by 0 hour auto purge, the number of users clicked a malicious link in an email message, which email and collaboration report should you use? To answer, select the appropriate option in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So we have the following statements. To identify the number of emails quarantined by ZAP, we have 4 options. To identify the number of times users clicked a malicious link in an email, we have 4 options. So the right option here is for the first one we have mail flow status report, and for the second one we have URL thread protection. So question number 38. You are an infrastructure architect whose organization has an existing Microsoft 365 tenant. You have recently deployed Active Directory Federation services and you now need to configure user authentication settings. You are in the process of running the register Azure AD Connect Health Sync Agent, PowerShell CMD let. You need to identify the server from which to run these CMD let. Which server should you run the CMD let from? And we have the following 4 options. Option A, domain controller. Option B, ADFS server. Option C, member server. Option D, Microsoft Entra Connect server, formerly Azure AD Connect server. So the right answer here is option D, Microsoft Entra Connect server. So question number 39. You have a Microsoft 365 tenant. You plan to manage incidents in the tenant by using the Microsoft 365 Defender. Which Microsoft service source will appear on the incidents page of the Microsoft 365 Defender portal? And we have the following 4 options. Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Azure Arc, Microsoft Defender for Identity. So the right answer here is option D, Microsoft Defender for Identity. So question number 40. You are a Microsoft administrator who needs to review the labeling methods available at your enterprise level organization. You want to make sure users are required to label items with their sensitivity level. Which method of sensitivity labeling should you use to require end users to apply labels to their emails and documents? We have the following 4 options. Manual labeling, automatic labeling, mandatory labeling, default labeling. So the right answer here is option C, mandatory labeling. So mandatory labeling allows you to require users to apply a label for documents and emails, just documents for containers and Power BI content. These labeling options ensure a label must be applied before users can save documents and send emails, create new groups or sites, and when they use unlabeled content for Power BI. Question number 41. You have a new Microsoft 365 E5 tenant. Enable security defaults is set to yes. A user signs into the tenant for the first time. Which multi-factor authentication method can user use? And how many days does the user have to register for MFA? To answer, select the appropriate option in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So MFA method, we have following 5 options, and number of days we have 4 options. So the right answer here is for MFA method, notification to Microsoft Authenticator app, and number of days is equal to 14. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 42. You are an IT administrator who works for an organization that has an Active Directory domain and an Azure Active Directory tenant. You recently implemented Azure AD Sync to synchronize all the user objects in the Active Directory domain with the Azure Active Directory tenant. Your manager has asked you to create 4 new user accounts in Active Directory that need to be synchronized in the shortest time possible. Which PowerShell CMDlet should you use to synchronize the new accounts? And we have the following 4 options. So the right answer here is option B. The Azure AD Sync scheduler runs every 30 minutes by default. To force a sync in between the default 30 minutes timings, you need to run the start AD sync cycle CMDlet. This PowerShell CMDlet allows you to run either a delta sync or run a full sync. Question number 43. Your network contains an on-premises Active Directory domain named conteso.com. The domain contains the objects shown in the following table. You configure Azure AD Connect to sync conteso.com to Azure AD. Which objects will sync to Azure AD? And we have the following 4 options. So the right answer here is option D. Question number 44. As the information security lead for your organization, you are investigating the use of endpoint data loss prevention for use within your organization to protect data on devices. What additional steps will you require before implementing endpoint DLP? Option A, ensure that the device is compliant. Option B, ensure that the user is a local admin on the machine. Option C, ensure that data classification policies are created. Option D, ensure that device management is enabled. So the right answer here is option D, ensure that device management is enabled. Before endpoint DLP is configured and utilized, it is important to note that enabling device management is required. This is the functionality that enables the collection of telemetry from the user's device and stores it within M365 to surface by the endpoint DLP product. Question number 45. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. You need to create conditional access policies to meet the following requirements. All users must use multi-factor authentication when they sign in from outside the corporate network. Users must only be able to sign in from outside the corporate network if the sign-in originates from a compliant device. All users must be blocked from signing in from outside the United States and Canada. Only users in the R&D department must be blocked from signing in from both Android and iOS devices. Only users in the finance department must be able to sign in to an Azure AD Enterprise application named App1. All other users must be blocked from signing into App1. What is the minimum number of conditional access policies you should create? And we have the following options. So the right answer here is option B, 4. So question number 46. Rosalia is planning a Microsoft Defender for endpoint deployment for her organization. She wants to target as many devices as possible after the pilot and plans to use Microsoft Endpoint Manager to define and deploy Defender to all user devices. Rosalia needs to first determine that all user devices are running operating systems that support a deployment from Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Which of the following can accept the Microsoft Defender for endpoint deployment via Microsoft Endpoint Manager? The options are Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android. So the right answer here is option A, B, and D. All common user devices can accept a Microsoft Endpoint Manager deployment. However, iOS can only accept Microsoft Defender based on app policies that you have already configured. So question number 47. Your network contains an on-premises Active Directory domain. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. You plan to implement directory synchronization. You need to identify potential synchronization issues for the domain. The solution must use the principle of least privilege. What should you use? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. So for tools, we have four options. For required group membership, we have following four options. So the right answers here is for tools, it's IDFix, and for required group membership, enterprise admins. So question number 48. You are an Office 365 administrator who has been asked to plan for the deployment of Teams in your organization. As part of the planning process, you have asked the network team to report on what ports are opened from user workstations to the internet. The network team indicates that all users can access TCP port 443, TCP port 80, TCP port 3389, and all UDP ports based on these information. Is your organization's network ready for Teams? And we have the following four options. Option A, yes, because Teams require TCP ports 80 and 443 and UDP ports 3478 through 3481 to be opened. Option B, no, because Teams require TCP port 445 to be open. Option C, yes, because Team requires TCP ports 80 and 443 and UDP ports 3400 through 3500 to be opened. Option D, yes, because Teams requires only TCP ports 80 and 443 to be opened. So the right answer here is option A, yes, because Teams require TCP ports 80 and 443 and UDP ports 3478 through 3481 to be opened. The organization's network is already prepared for Teams since all Teams require is TCP ports 80 and 443 and UDP ports 3478 through 3481 to be open outbound. Question number 49. You have an Azure AD tenant named contoso.com that contains the users shown in the following table. Multi-factor authentication is configured to use 131.107.0.0/24 as trusted IPs. The tenant contains the named location shown in the following table. You create a conditional access policy that has the following configurations. Users are workload identities assignments. All users cloud apps are actions assignment app 1 conditions include all trusted locations, grant access, require multi-factor authentication. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So we have the following statements. So let's see whether the statements are true or false. So the first two statements are true and the third statement is false. So question number 50, you have Microsoft 365 subscription. You register two applications named App 1 and App 2 to Azure AD. You need to ensure that users who connect to App 1 require multi-factor authentication. MFA is required only for App 1. What should you do? Option A, from the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, create a conditional access policy. Option B, from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, configure the modem authentication settings. Option C, From the Enterprise Application blade of the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, configure the user settings. Option D, from multi-factor authentication, configure the service settings. So the right answer here is option A. Question number 51. Carl is monitoring suspicious activities on his organization's network using Microsoft Defender for Identity. Having witnessed activities that warrant further investigation, Carl would like to pinpoint certain traffic data by using network name resolution to identify the IP address of suspicious traffic while not using all possible lookups. Which of the four network name resolution methods should be used if it's not possible to use them all when reconciling IP addresses to device name? And we have the following four options. So the right answer here is option B, DNS lookup method. DNS lookup method should be used alongside one other method if it's not possible to use all four methods. This is what Carl should do to ID the right IP address. Question number 52. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. You need to implement identity protection. The solution must meet the following requirements. Identify when a user's credentials are compromised and shared on the dark web. Provide users that have compromised credentials with the ability to self-remediate. What should you do? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. To identify when users have compromised credentials configure, we have the following four options. And to enable self-remediation select, we have three options. So let's see the right answers are. For the first one, we have a user risk policy. And for the second one, we have require password change. So question number 53. You are an IT technician for an organization that is planning on utilizing Microsoft 365 cloud services in the near future. You have a requirement that the authentication should occur on premises, not in the cloud. Your manager has asked you to review the different identity strategies. Which of the following authentication strategies meet your requirements? And you have the following four options. So the right answer here is option A, federation with ADFS. Federation with ADFS is the correct answer. Azure Active Directory Connect allows you to implement federation with on-premises Active Directory federation services and Azure AD. With federation sign-in, users authenticate on-premises, not the cloud. Therefore, this is the correct answer. Question number 54. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. You plan to implement Microsoft Purview policies to meet the following requirements. Identify documents that are stored in Microsoft Teams and SharePoint that contain personally identifiable information. Report on shared documents that contain personal identifiable information. What should you create? Option A data loss prevention policy. Option B, a retention policy. Option C, an alert policy. And option D, a Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps policy. So the right answer here is option a data loss prevention policy. So question number 55. Your company wants to use Microsoft Information Protection Sensitivity labels to classify and protect data. You need to determine the impact of publishing sensitivity labels through label policy. The labels will apply to SharePoint content. Which of the following applies to publishing sensitivity labels through label policy? Option A, sensitivity labels apply to content as soon as they are created. Option B, applying security labels to containers such as sites and groups result in documents or emails in the container being automatically labeled. Option C, when used in Microsoft Cloud App Security, security labels can be used to protect content in third-party apps. Option D, security label policies are visible to users who have been given policy access when the sensitivity labels are created. So the right answer here is option C. When used with Microsoft Cloud App Security, security labels can be used to protect content in third-party apps. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 56. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription that contains the resources shown in the following table. You create a sensitivity label named label 1. To which resource can you apply label 1? And we have the following 5 options. So the right answer here is option E, group 1, group 2 and site 1. So question number 57. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. You need to meet the following requirements. Automatically encrypt documents stored in Microsoft OneDrive and SharePoint. Enable co-authoring for Microsoft Office documents encrypted by using a sensitivity label. Which two settings should you use in the Microsoft Purview Compliance portal? To answer, select the appropriate settings in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So we have the following exhibit. So let's see the right option here is information protection and settings. So question number 58. You are an IT technician whose company has an Azure Active Directory tenant with multi-factor authentication enabled. You have allowed users to submit fraud alerts and enabled a feature to block users when fraud is reported. You receive an alert that one of your users has submitted a fraud alert of their account. After how long will the user's Azure AD account be unblocked? And the options are 7 days, 1 month, 1 day, 90 days. So the right answer here is option D, 90 days. The default setting for blocking access to a user's account when fraud is reported is 90 days. If required, an administrator with the correct permission can manually unblock a user's account, otherwise it will stay blocked for the full 90 days. Question number 59. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 tenant. Users store data in the following locations: Microsoft Teams, Microsoft OneDrive, Microsoft Exchange Online, Microsoft SharePoint. You need to retain Microsoft 365 data for 2 years. What is the minimum number of retention policies that you should create? So the right answer here is option C, 3. Question number 60. You are a systems engineer for a global organization. You have used Active Directory domain services in the past but have recently obtained a Microsoft 365 tenant and plan to deploy multiple cloud services over time. Your manager has asked you to ensure that pass-through authentication and single sign-on can be used in the environment. During the planning, you have made the decision not to configure the Azure AD Connect server in staging mode. What is the maximum number of Azure AD Connect servers you can run? And we have the following options. So the right answer here is option B1. In the standard configuration without a staging server, it is not possible to have multiple Azure AD Connect servers synchronizing to a single Azure AD tenant. It is possible to synchronize multiple domains. However, this scenario refers to servers only. Therefore, the answer is 1. Question number 61. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription. You need to configure a compliance solution that meets the following requirements. Define sensitive data based on existing data samples. Automatically prevents data that matches the samples from being shared externally in Microsoft SharePoint or email messages. Which two components should you configure? Each correct answer represents part of the solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Option A trainable classifier. Option B, a sensitive info type. Option C, an insider risk policy. Option D, an adaptive policy scope. Option E, a data loss prevention DLP policy. So the right answer here is option A and option E. Question number 62. As the information security admin of your organization, you are planning to utilize assessments from within the M365 Compliance Center in order to improve overall compliance posture within your organization and also to demonstrate compliance with ISO 27001 data security controls. What steps would you take to prepare an initial assessment? Option A, from within Compliance Manager, create new assessment. Option B, from within Compliance Manager, open appropriate Compliance Manager solution. Option C, from within data connectors, add new connectors. Option D, from within communication compliance, create new policy. So the right answer here is option A, from within compliance manager, create new assessment. In order to prepare an assessment against a specific compliance standard from within the M365 Compliance Center, you would select Compliance Manager, select Assessment and create a new assessment based on the standard and product required. Question number 63. Your network contains an on-premises Active Directory domain named contoso.com. The domain contains the users shown in the following table. The domain syncs to an Azure AD tenant named contoso.com as shown in the exhibit. User 2 fails to authenticate to Azure AD when signing in as user2 at the rate fabricum.com. You need to ensure that user 2 can access the resources in Azure AD. Solution: from the on-premises Active Directory domain, you set the UPN suffix for user2 to at the rate contoso.com. You instruct user2 to sign in as user2 at the rate contoso.com. Does this meet the goal? So the right option here is option A. Yes, it does meet the required goal. Question number 64. You are a technical engineer for a company that plans to deploy Azure AD Connect to allow your on-premises Active Directory objects to synchronize with Azure AD. As part of the deployment, you want to implement additional servers for disaster recovery while minimizing the cost of administrative overhead. What should you do to meet these deployment requirements? Option A, install an Azure AD Connect servers in staging mode. Option B, install Active Directory Federation services for failover. Option C, install multiple Azure AD Connect servers in a server farm and connect to Azure AD. Option D, install a fresh Azure AD Connect on a new server in the event of DR. So the right answer here is option A. Installing an Azure AD Connect servers in staging mode is the correct answer. Azure AD Connect can be installed on a second server in what is called staging mode in a DR situation. If the primary server fails, you can fail over to the staging server. There, this is the correct answer. This method of deployment will also avoid the administrative overhead of deploying without using staging mode. Question number 65. Your network contains an Active Directory domain. You deploy an Azure AD tenant. Another administrator configures the domain to synchronize to Azure AD. You discover that 10 user accounts in an organizational unit are not synchronized to Azure AD. All the other user accounts synchronize successfully. You review Azure AD Connect Health and discover that all the user account synchronizes completed successfully. If you need to ensure that the 10 user accounts are synchronized to Azure AD, you run idfix.exe and export the 10 user accounts. Does this meet the goal? So the right answer here is option B. No, it does not meet the required goal. So question number 66. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription. You need to review metrics for the following: the daily active users in Microsoft Teams, recent Microsoft service issues. What should you use? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Teams daily active users, recent Microsoft service issues. So the right options are usage reports and service health. Question number 67. You are a system support technician who works for an organization that has an Azure AD tenant. There is an Azure AD sync set up between an on-premises domain controller and your Azure AD tenant. You are currently running a proof of concept exercise with 25 users. Your manager has asked you to assign the ops team the relevant permissions to be able to access the sign-in logs and audit logs in Azure AD. You must use the concept of the least privilege. To which role should you assign the ops team? And the options are reports reader, global administrator, security administrator, user admin. So the right answer here is option A, reports reader. The report reader role has the relevant access to view both the Azure AD sign-in and audits log. As this is a reader level Azure role, it has no access to modify any settings and has the least amount of access compared to the other possible answers. Therefore, it is the correct answer. Question number 68. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription. You need to add additional Microsoft.com domains to the subscription. The additional domains must be assignable as email addresses for users. What is the maximum number of on Microsoft.com domains the subscription can contain? So the right answer here is option C, 5. Question number 69. You have an Azure AD tenant that contains the administrative units shown in the following table. You have the following users: a user named user1 that is assigned the password administrator for AU1 and AU2. A user named user2 that is assigned the user administrator for AU1. A user named user3 that is assigned the user administrator for the tenant. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the right answers for the statements are, so the first statement is false, the second one is true, and the third one is false. Question number 70. As a security administrator of your organization, you are reviewing your security alerts via the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. You spot the alert activity from the infrequent country. You would like to check in which activity the account has taken part. What steps would you take to discover these details? Option A, review the related activity of the alert. Option B, run a compliance scan of the account. Option C, review the Azure AD account settings of the account that generated the alert. Option D, review alert details and select the close alert function. This will email the list of actions to your administrator account. So the right answer here is option A, review the related activity of the alert. This will enable the administrator to view and export a list of activities related to the user account that triggered the alert. These can help identify the radius of services that these account may have accessed. So question number 71, your network contains an Active Directory domain named aditum.com that is synced to Azure AD. The domain contains 100 user accounts. The city attribute for all the users is set to the city where the users resides. You need to modify the value of the city attribute to the 3-letter airport code of each city. What should you do? The option A, from Windows PowerShell on a domain controller, run the get ADU user and set ADU user CMDlets. Option B, from Azure Cloud Shell, run the get ADU user and set ADU user CMDlets. Option C, from Windows PowerShell on the domain controller, run the get MG user and update MG user CMDlets. Option D, from Azure Cloud Shell, run the get MG user and update MG user CMDlets. So the right answer here is option A. Question number 72. As a security administrator of your organization, you are concerned that Exchange Online users in your organization may be targeted with malware or phishing emails. You are looking to configure a policy that helps to protect your users from this type of threat as well as blocking them from clicking through to the original URL in any emails received. What should you configure? Option A, create a safe attachments policy and ensure that safe attachments unknown malware is blocked. Option B, create a new mail rule that blocks any email with the URL in the message body. Option C, create a safe links policy and ensure that the settings are configured to meet your goal. Option D, from the Exchange Online portal, select the users you wish to protect and edit the mailbox attributes to enable mailbox protection. So the right answer here is option C. Microsoft 365 Defender for Office 365 has policies that can be configured to enable the Defender features across user mailboxes and further into O365 productivity suite. In this case, as the admin is looking to specially protect against phishing and malicious URLs, the feature in Defender that has these capability is called Safe Links. The policy can be created in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal that enables the capability to scan for malicious links in emails and action these to do things like block access for the user in the event a malicious link is found. Question number 73. Your company has a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. You need to perform the following tasks. View the adoption score of the company. Create a new service request to Microsoft. Which two options should you use in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So we have the following exhibit. So let's see the right answers here. Support reports. Question number 74. You are an IT administrator who is designing the encryption settings within Microsoft Defender for the machines at your organization. You would like to restrict your access to recovery keys until they have encrypted their machines. Which file vault encryption settings should you enable to allow the user to view their personal recovery key from any device after encryption? Option A, number of times allowed to bypass. Option B, hide recovery key. Option C, escrow location description of a personal recovery key. Option D, disable prompt at sign out. So the right answer here is option B, hide recovery key. The hide recovery key setting will hide the recovery key until after the device has been encrypted. At that time, the user can access their personal recovery key from whatever device they choose. The number of times allowed to bypass escrow location and disable prompt settings are other file vault encryption settings that do not directly affect whether the recovery key is visible. Question number 75. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription that uses an Azure AD tenant named contoso.com. The tenant contains the users shown in the following table. You add another user named user5 to the user administrator role. You need to identify which two management tasks user5 can perform. Which two tasks should you identify? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Option A, delete user 2 and user 4 only. Option B, reset the password of user 4 only. Option C, reset the password for any user in Azure AD. Option D, delete user 1, user 2 and user 4 only. Option E, reset the password of user 2 and user 4 only. Option F, delete any user in Azure AD. So the right answer here is option A and option E, delete user 2 and user 4 only, and reset the password of user 2 and user 4 only. Question number 76. You are a support engineer for a company that has an existing hybrid identity environment where user objects are synchronized from on-premises to Azure AD. Your company has recently onboarded 10 new graduates whose accounts have all been created on an Active Directory and moved to the relevant organizational unit that is synchronized with Azure AD. You check the Azure AD tenant a few hours after the automatic sync and notice that only 8 of the graduate user accounts have synchronized successfully. You need to investigate why the two user objects have not synchronized correctly. Which of the following tools should you use to troubleshoot this issue? Option A, Azure AD Connect. Option B, Azure AD. Option C, ID Fix. And option D, Azure Health Monitoring Tool. So the right answer here is option C, ID Fix. The ID Fix tool provides administrators the ability to query, identify, and remediate issues of object synchronization error in the Windows Server AD forest when they are preparing to synchronize with Azure AD. Therefore, this is the correct answer. Question number 77. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription that contains a Microsoft 365 group named Group 1. Group 1 is configured as shown in the following exhibit. An external user named user1 has an email address of user1 at outlook.com. You need to add user1 to group 1. What should you do first? And which portal should you use? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the right options here are invite user1 to collaborate with your organization as a guest and the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Question number 78. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription that contains a user named user1. User1 requires admin access to perform the following tasks. Manage Microsoft Exchange online settings. Create Microsoft 365 groups. You need to ensure that user1 only has admin access for 8 hours and requires approval before the role assignment takes place. What should you use? Option A, Azure AD Identity Protection. Option B, Microsoft Entra Verified ID. Option C, conditional access. Option D, Azure AD privileged identity management. So the right answer here is option D, Azure AD privileged identity management. Question number 79. As the security administrator for your organization, you are seeking ways in which to prevent users from uploading files that contain malware. You understand that cloud app security policies can be configured to achieve these, but which policy should you configure? Option A, conditional access policy. Option B, threat detection, anomaly detection policy. Option C, threat detection, zero auth policy. Option D, conditional access, session policy. So the right answer here is option D, conditional access, session policy. If you configure the control file upload option set as the session control type and malware detection set as the inspection method within a session policy in Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps session policy, these will achieve the required effect of preventing a user from uploading a file containing malware. The file will be scanned in real time by the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Engine. You're also able to configure the same settings for file download if required. Question number 80. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription that contains the groups shown in the following table. All the groups are deleted. Which groups can be restored and what is the retention period? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Groups that can be restored and retention period. So the right option here is group 3 only and retention period is 30 days. Question number 81. You are part of an enterprise IT team that supports your company's Microsoft 365 tenant. Your manager has asked you to report on the company's Microsoft 365 subscriptions, especially which users have been assigned a license as a result of being part of a group. You will need to ensure that the group that has been used to assign the license is captured in the report you produce. Which action will take you to the correct place to gain the relevant information for your report? Option A, navigate to the monitor blade within the Azure portal. Option B, navigate to the licenses blade within the Azure portal. Option C, navigate to the products blade from within the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Option D, navigate to the users blade from within the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So the right answer here is option B, navigate to the licenses blade within the Azure portal. Navigate to the licenses blade within the Azure portal is the correct answer. You need to log into the Azure portal and navigate to the licenses blade in order to capture the relevant information, which is to report on the users who have been assigned licenses, but also the name of the group the specific subscription has been assigned to. This information can be obtained from the licensing blade in Azure. So question number 82, you have a Microsoft E5 subscription. You need to ensure that administrators who need to manage Microsoft Exchange Online are assigned the Exchange administrator role for 5 hours at a time. What should you implement? Option A, Azure AD privileged identity management. Option B, a conditional access policy. Option C, a communication compliance policy. Option D, Azure AD identity protection. Option E, groups that have dynamic membership. So the right answer here is option A, Azure AD privileged identity management. Question number 83. You are part of a large enterprise IT team that works for an organization whose network comprises two Active Directory forests and two domains in each forest. All end user computers are joined to the domain and currently run Windows 10. An Azure AD tenant has recently been provisioned in preparation of for hybrid Azure AD to be configured. The tenant will allow you to hybrid join the Windows 10 devices. You need to ensure that the Azure AD tenant is discoverable from the Windows 10 devices. Which of the following should you create in each for us to enable these? Option A, a new trust relationship. Option B, a migration endpoint. Option C, a new service connection point. Option D, a new conditional access policy. So the right answer here is option C, a new service connection point. The correct answer is a new service connection connector point in order to allow the Windows 10 devices to register and discover the Azure AD tenant information. An SCP object for hybrid Azure AD join must exist in the configuration naming context for the computers forest. So question number 84. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription. You suspect that several Microsoft Office 365 applications or services were recently updated. You need to identify which applications or services were recently updated. What are two possible ways to achieve the goal? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Option A. From the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, review the Service Health Blade. Option B. From the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, review the Message Center Blade. Option C. From the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, review the Products Blade. Option D. From the Microsoft 365 Admin Mobile app, review the Messages. So the right answer here is option B and option D. Question number 85. There are three members of the first line support team that have the password administrator role, user administrator role, and security administrator role respectively. A new first line support team member has no administrator roles configured and needs his password reset. Which roles are required to reset a new team member's password? Option A, only the password administrator role. Option B, either the password administrator role or the user administrator role. Option C, only the security administrator role. Option D, only the user administrator role. So the right answer here is option B, either the password administrator role or the user administrator role. Question number 86. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription that contains the domains shown in the following exhibit. Which domain name suffixes can you use when you create users? So you have the following four options. So the right answer here is option B. Question number 87. You are a project engineer who works for an organization that has migrated from on-premises Exchange to Exchange Online. Your organization closely works with another partner who is also using Microsoft 365 services and has their own tenant. Your manager has given you the task of implementing calendar sharing between your organization and the partner organization. You need to ensure users in the partner Microsoft 365 tenant can access user calendars in your organization without delay. What should you do to enable calendar access? Option A, configure and accept a domain via the Exchange Admin Center. Option B, run SharePoint PowerShell cmdlet set SPO site. Option C, configure a new organization relationship via Exchange Admin Center. Option D, configure a conditional access policy via Azure AD. So the right answer here is option C. The correct action is that you should configure a new organization relationship via Exchange Admin Center. As a calendar is part of a user's mailbox, the changes you make need to be made from the Exchange Admin Center. The requirement is to allow sharing of users calendars with an external organization's Microsoft 365 tenant, especially their calendars. There you need to configure a new organization relationship with the organization's tenant to allow you to share calendar information with only them and no other external company. Question number 88. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription. You plan to implement Microsoft Purview Privileged Access Management. Which Microsoft Office 365 workload support privileged access? Option A, Microsoft Exchange Online only. Option B, Microsoft Teams only. Option C, Microsoft Exchange Online and SharePoint Online only. Option D, Microsoft Teams and SharePoint Online only. Option E, Microsoft Teams, Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. So the right answer here is option A, Microsoft Exchange Online only. Question number 89. You are a cloud infrastructure engineer who works for an organization with a Microsoft 365 tenant. You work within a team that manages the various Microsoft 365 services, including Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and Microsoft Teams. Multiple users call into the help desk and report issues with Exchange Online, including not being able to connect to the services. You log in into the Microsoft 365 Health section of the portal to take a look if there are any reported issues, which status will indicate the service isn't functioning and users cannot access the service. The options are service interruption, service degradation, investigating, service restored. So the right answer here is option A, service interruption. Question number 19. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription that contains the users shown in the following table. You need to provide user 4 with early access to Microsoft 365 feature and service updates. You need to identify which Microsoft 365 setting must be configured and which user can modify the setting. The solution must use the principle of least privilege. What should you identify? To answer, select the appropriate option in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the right options here for Microsoft 365 setting, we have privileged access, and for user 3 only. So question number 91. You are an IT administrator for a small firm that wants to migrate its on-premises email to Exchange email but does not have a tenant. Your manager purchased a Microsoft 365 tenant that has on Microsoft.com domain as a default. Your on-premises domain is a .local domain. You install Azure AD Connect and try to configure the tool to synchronize the on-premises user objects with Azure AD. However, you get an error about your on-premises domain. What steps do you need to complete to synchronize the .local domain to Azure AD? Option A, you cannot add a non-routable domain to Azure AD. Option B, you need to add the relevant DNS records and verify the domain in the Microsoft 365 portal. Option C, you need to add the on Microsoft.com domain suffix into an on-premises Active Directory. Option D, configure a domain trust between the .local and the .on Microsoft.com domain. So the right answer here is option D. Configure a domain trust between the .local and the .on Microsoft.com domain. Question number 92. You have a Microsoft 365 subscription. You are planning a threat management solution for your organization. You need to minimize the likelihood that users will be affected by the following threats. Opening files in Microsoft SharePoint that contains malicious content. Impersonation and spoofing attacks in email messages. Which policies should you create in Microsoft 365 Defender? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So for opening files in SharePoint that contains malicious content, we have safe attachments. For impersonation and spoofing attack in email messages, we have anti-phishing. Question number 93. You plan to implement an endpoint DLP policy targeting document creation, printing, and copying to USB thumb drives. You need to specify which actions can be taken for each of the activities. Activity A. Create a document in a protected location. B. Print a protected document. C. Copy to removable USB. An action: audit only, restricted only, audited and restricted. Select which of the following options best describes the possible activity action combination. So the right combination here is option B, A1, B3, C3. All activities can be audited and restricted except document creation and renaming, which can only be audited.